The topic what we have decided for today is going to be very enlightening, very educative. People around Singapore and people who have come all across from various reasons to attend this event. So I would like to, I'd like all of you to introduce yourself, tell us something about your company, what you do, and then we'll begin the panel. Yeah, Ima, from you?
Sure. Thanks. First of all, super happy to be here. So I'm a founding partner of LongHash Ventures. We are a crypto native fund with headquarters in Singapore. And we run both the Web3 native accelerator as well as the funds focus on across a range of theses like DeFi, multi-chain infra, gaming infra, and whatnot. So we've been around for like 6 years now. And happy to share my view.
Hassan, yeah.
Great. Thank you, and excited to welcome everyone to Singapore for a very topical session. My name is Hassan Ahmed. I'm the country director of Singapore at Coinbase. Coinbase is a global crypto platform. We're publicly traded on NASDAQ. We service consumers, institutions, and developers across our various products and services. Closer to home, Coinbase Singapore has been in Singapore for about 4 years. We're fully licensed by the MAS and have a local homegrown team that's building in the region for the region.
That's right. So yeah, Fiona. Yeah.
Thank you. It's great to see you all. I'm Fiona Murray, Managing Director for Asia Pacific at Ripple. At Ripple, we're a one-stop shop for digital asset infrastructure. We help organizations and institutions to move value, whether that's fiat or digital, to store value with a custody solution, to exchange it with the launch of our stablecoin at the end of this year. And really excited to be here in my home in Singapore, where we are licensed for payments with our MPI license by MAS as well, and excited to tell you all about how great it is.
It's wonderful. I think everybody whom we have in this panel are great going to talk about Singapore as a whole. So Ima, I would like to start with you. We know Singapore, and it's been almost like 10 or 11th time I'm here. I've been moving to Singapore, but the craze for Web3 blockchain, what I have seen in the Far East region compared to Singapore, it's very prominent. So what makes Singapore as a potential hub for Web3, what we have seen for the last couple of years?
Yeah, I really, just a bit of background. So I'm originally from China, and I came here for my university study. And then after that, I went to Australia, Hong Kong, and moved back to Singapore about 6 years ago. And I think every time when I came back to Singapore, I feel like, you know, Singapore has always been relentlessly seeking talents, I think. If I were to sum up, I think not just becoming a ever more important, prominent hub for Web3, but also just generally, I think it's become super, super important, right, across other industries as well. So I think it boils down to a couple of factors. One, I think it's the meritocracy-based kind of society, right? Always open for talents, always open to, super easy to get a visa to come and work here. And then secondly is the tax regulation, right? There's no capital gain, I think, which is, very relevant to a lot of crypto holders as compared to many other countries' tax regulation. And the third thing is with regards to specifically to Web3, I remember back in 2019, Singapore has already issued a digital token offering guide. Maybe I got the name slightly wrong there, but I feel like the government has been super progressive and really trying to understand new technology and coming up with transparent regulatory frameworks to help the industry progress forward. So I think a combination of those factors have really made Singapore increasingly a hub for Web3.
Oh, that's nice. So, Hassan, you also spent quite a long time understanding the growth, what the country has seen in terms of targeting or inviting Web3. So, what you have seen over the last couple of years in terms of innovation in the Web3 in Singapore?
Yeah, so I think just taking a step back, Singapore has run a remarkable job at first being a financial hub, and then really over the last decade or 15 years being a fintech hub as well. And I think it's that same lineage that's tracking through to digital assets as well. So I think where Singapore really shines is that it's an open economy, and it's almost sort of by design that they need that for for growth as well. So all of the policies and incentive structures are really shaped around just making sure that there's a global inflow of global talent, foreign investments coming in, and then also just a lot of focus on incentivizing companies to set up their regional headquarters or at least coverage offices in Singapore as well. For us, as we were going through our thinking and our journey, we're fortunate as a global company that we could have our pick of spots. So when we were thinking of how to really enter the APAC region the right way, Singapore really stood out to us as sort of that right combination of access to, gateway to other markets, access to talent, just that level of regulatory clarity that we needed for our business model to be able to set up roots here and then invest for the long term.
Okay. Fiona, what is your view?
Yeah.
What do you have noticed how the Web3 has grown up in last so many years?
Yeah, so, Emma and Hassan said it very well. We have a very similar view. For us, we could simplify it down to really 3 points. We do see Singapore as a Web3 hub today. So not a potential one, but it's all happening right here, right now. So the first is absolutely that regulatory clarity and framework, which has allowed Coinbase, Ripple to establish licensed operations here. MAS was at the forefront of bringing that regulatory clarity on the global stage, and we're delighted to have that, and would encourage many other jurisdictions to follow suit so that we can do more safely and effectively together. The second piece, look at the innovation around at Token. It's incredible to see that, and we all know that even in Web3, what you need to have are banks. You have to have TradFi support and infrastructure. Every entity needs a bank account, and that's not a given in many jurisdictions here. The banks are encouraged to work with safe, responsible Web3 organizations, and that makes a huge difference to being able to innovate effectively. And then lastly for us, Singapore has a reputation for stability.
Yeah.
And when you're doing crazy, exciting things with technology, it's really important that as you're building, you've got stability of the legal system, and you can rely on the organizations around to have governance and to enable you to grow without worrying about all of that. So, yeah, absolutely, Singapore is already there.
So right. What you rightly said is, so let's talk about, as you mentioned, that in terms of regulation, in terms of policies, this country is way ahead compared to a couple of other countries. So what sort of specific policies, what you have seen, what has been implemented in this country to boost and to encourage the Web3 platform or the blockchain platform?
Yeah, so in the case of Ripple, we run a global payments network, and what we do that's different in that network is we enable the use of digital assets for real-time settlement across border. And we use Singapore as a hub in that network. So in Singapore, we're licensed with a DPT license, a digital payment token license that enables us to sell digital tokens and process all the operations as a hub here for many of our global operations. And that is the framework that has allowed us and other organizations that are like-minded to come to set up and to establish Singapore as a hub.
So, Hassan, have you seen a smooth roadmap in terms of the government or the regulators bringing in terms of policies?
Yeah, I think the having that foundation of, look, this is a fit-for-purpose licensing framework for what they call digital payment tokens really sets the stage, right? Because then it sets the rules of the game in a very clear way. And I think in addition to that, one thing that is more known to folks who are here is that the MAS and the industry actually have a very good dialogue because a lot of this is early. We're helping to shape policy together. So the MAS will generally put out a consultation paper. They will take in input via the industry associations or through bilateral arrangements. And then we will have an opportunity to at least voice, hey, this is what we see in other jurisdictions. These are some things that you should think about so that you can balance access and innovation and consumer protection together. So we have enjoyed that relationship with the MAS in being able to formulate these policies. One thing I just want to call out that even outside of the MAS, there are other agencies within what we call Singapore Inc. as well that are also working pretty tirelessly. So for example, the Economic Development Board of Singapore, the EDB, which is effectively the business development arm of Singapore, does a tremendous job at attracting companies and really kind of pitching them on why Singapore is the right choice for them. Hong Kong has something similar, and now Dubai, Abu Dhabi have picked up the same model. But we really see the EDB has having done a fantastic job at that.
Great. So I'll come back to you with another questions on that point. So Emma, you wanted to talk about something on the policies, what Singapore government has helped in terms of Web3 companies?
Yeah, I think Hassan and Fiona has covered it pretty well, but maybe like more relevant to the field I'm in, which is like VC investment into tokens. I got into the industry in 2018. I remember that was the time where 2017 was like, ICOs, right? A lot of projects were trying to figure out what's a safer jurisdiction to do token issuance, set up foundations, and a lot of the US projects were actually setting up foundations in Singapore. And seeing Singapore as one of the more favorable jurisdictions to do that. And MAS came up with very progressive, like what I mentioned, the digital token offering guide, right? Took a very practical approach and try to apply, take existing regulations, but also cater to the new technology. So I thought that was very good. And then in addition to the efforts mentioned by MAS, EDB, I would like to give a shout out to Temasek because that's the Singapore's sovereign fund. And they have been instrumental, I think, in seeding the ecosystem here. So under Temasek, they have, I think, 3 efforts under the overall blockchain, right? They have the venture building platform, Manyala, which is to build blockchain-related businesses. And then second part is the fund of funds, which is to seed leading crypto funds. And then the third part is the crypto-native funds called Superscript, which is they can allow them to invest into crypto-native businesses. So the Superscript actually is an investor into our accelerators as well. And I think very few central bank-related entities in the world are doing things like that. And this was back in since 2019, right? So I feel like there's really collective effort, right, by people within Singapore ecosystem trying to push the space forward in a very practical way.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. Hassan, I wanted to come back to, like, in terms of regulations, what we are seeing in SEC and other countries and all. So let's say how cooperative in terms of regulations the government are bringing, like tomorrow I want to start a company, a Web3 company in Singapore. So in terms of regulatory help, how much it is prone and how much it is encouraging Web3 startups?
Yeah, so I think with Singapore, one of the just foundational things is that it's very easy to incorporate. It's very easy to get started. There's a very clear blueprint for how one goes through that business incorporation process. I think in addition to that, one of the other kind of delineations here is that if you're running a self-custodial business or an on-chain protocol, that's regulation exempt, and even the letter of the law is very clear about that. So I think it's very encouraging to see in Singapore as a hub that, unlike other jurisdictions, US included, that they're not trying to overreach onto the protocol and self-custody side and attempt to regulate that before there's any warranted need to do so. So for I'd say Web3 builders and developers that are looking to move here, there are grants available even from the EDB for encouragement. It's easy to set up. There's access to local and global talent. You can even sort of nearshore, with Malaysia, a lot of protocols that are set up here have this dual model going on as well. So overall, I'd say that it's relatively straightforward. It's still complex, but it's relatively straightforward. I think the other maybe thing to call out is when we think about ecosystems, is that they're ecosystems because they're multifaceted and they're multidimensional. So we have builders and projects, we have VCs like LongHash, we have service providers like Ripple and Coinbase, and we have regulators that are also in the mix. And so you really have that village that's kind of working together to make sure that these things are circular and we're able to grow together as well.
Okay. Fiona, what is your, what we have observed in US is like, when you're starting a business, so you go one step back, forward and one step back. But in the US, you go one step and they pull you back 2 steps. That's not happening in Singapore. Singapore is very prone. So what is your thought on that?
Yeah, so we're headquartered in San Francisco, and we run a global business, working with some of the world's largest banks when they're self-custodying, working with some of the new entrants to the space who are tokenizing on the XRP ledger. And what we have seen in the US is that the regulator there, through a lack of clarity, has completely stifled innovation. So that innovation has moved elsewhere to places like Singapore, the UK, Europe, UAE, where they're there are, and Japan, where the regulator is embracing progress, partnering with the private sector and bringing clarity, and there's just no dispute about that. So here in Singapore, again, where we have that license structure, we run our global payments network. More than 50% of Ripple's global payment flows through the digital asset goes through Singapore.
Yes.
So you can, not the US. In fact, it's not worth mentioning the comparison. So it really does make a very big difference where you have that forward-thinking regulator, and we see much more growth and some of the really big players moving into this space in Asia Pacific as well because of that clarity here in Singapore.
Yeah, that's a valid point. Okay, now I'll continue with you. Like, how are the educational institutions in Singapore adopting to support the growing Web3 sector? So education is inevitable. Like, today people are talking about AI, but people are missing out that AI is something not new, which has been there for ages, and it's just that we started exploring. So in terms, education is must. So what is your view on that?
I love this question on education, not least because I'm Asian and Asians love education. and I have a toddler, so we're already planning out his educational future. But I'll say that Singapore is fantastic at predicting what trends there are and then building talent to fit those requirements and those needs that are coming up. We see that in Singapore, the universities do a wonderful job of providing world-class education. And what I really like to see here is actually their openness to collaborating with the private sector as well. So at Ripple, we take this super seriously. In 2018, we launched the University Blockchain Research Initiative. So we partner with universities around the world to provide, and so far from 2018, we've provided over $60 million in funding to help universities and academia do real-world research and solve real-world problems, which is something that I think we all agree is really important in the Web3 space.
How many universities you have tied up across the globe?
Many. Our flagship university partner in Singapore is NUS. So with them, we help them launch their fintech group. They have sponsored hackathons, student-led hackathons, so they can attack really what the students want to do and build utility in this space. Speaking of talent, what we did during COVID, which was a tough time for everybody, in partnership with NUS, was we funded the enrollment of 300 students and mid-career professionals here in Singapore who wanted a career change. And at the end of that course, 200 of those 300 students found full-time work in fintech. So we see, that education has a direct impact on your ability to work and the ability for Singapore to fuel the talent in this space. I'll say one more thing on the topic, and that's once you have education and you build and you inspire a group of people to build in Web3 and blockchain, you need to have more funding. So the next thing that we've done is we have the XRPL Accelerator Program. We have a hub here in Singapore, and year to date, we've provided 11 organizations with early stage seed funding so that they can build on-chain here out of Singapore.
Wonderful. That's a great initiative. Hassan, do you think that education is needed and educational institutions should come forward in terms of teaching Web3 and blockchain everything?
Yeah, I think there's strong technical talent and strong technical programs coming out of the secondary institutions here. So like Fiona said, I'd say NUS is probably the most premier one in the market, but we also see very strong talent coming out of NTU as well, and for business roles, SMU. So for our part, we started our summer intern program in Singapore last year, which was very successful. So this summer we actually had our largest intern class ever, mostly from the institutions that I mentioned. And we have an ongoing conversation, with these both student groups as well as the faculty that are thinking about how to shape curriculum and want to stay up to date with what's happening from the practitioner point of view as well. So we will be exploring programs for how do we, provide more input into curriculums with these universities.
Yeah, as you said, education is an ongoing process. Like, there is no dearth of learning. Yeah, Ima, your view on this in terms of educating more and more people around about Web3 and how Singapore is actually doing it?
Yeah, happy to share. I think crypto started being a very small cypherpunk, very tech-savvy type of like community, right? But today it's becoming more and more mainstream. You actually have a lot more people who didn't have a technological background, right? And I myself came from like computing background, right? I was a banker and then a consultant at McKinsey. So when I got in the industry in 2019, I was like, oh my God, what can I do? Because it's like two-person startup, both of them code, right? And there's not much BD you do. But today, I feel like Singapore has this complete ecosystem of like head of BD, head of ecosystem, right? Like also from an educational perspectives, like Hassan and Fiona were saying, both of the leading universities, NTU, NUS, SMU, they all have blockchain clubs, right? And some of the leading ecosystem project actually originated from NUS, like Zeebu were founded by NUS professor and PhD students, right, back in 2019.
Okay.
Kyber, the same, NUS PhD, and then Outlayer founded. So in a way, I think because you kind of planted that seeds very early, and some of these founders become successful, right? Then they go back, started blockchain clubs, starts to host hackathons, right? And there's a lot more like initiatives around education. And for us as well, like we started to run accelerator since 2019, and Enterprise Singapore has been provide us with fundings to host like hackathons and educational seminars, workshops, and whatnot. So I think now the ecosystem is becoming a lot more complete around education.
Okay, so now we have spoken about the influx of Web3 companies in Singapore. How far it has impacted the local market and how far it has impacted the job market in Singapore? Let's say 3 years, 4 years down the line, a lot of companies have come to Singapore, they have established, there is a success story with every company. So how far it has impacted, Hassan?
Yeah, so I think the impact has been steady in a long-term view. It's been cyclical just as sort of the crypto cycle has played out. This is actually an area where the industry recognizes that, hey, we know that there's a good impact happening both at a job creation level as well as FDI, but we've not done enough to quantify that. So this year, there's an organization called the Singapore FinTech Association, and that has like a Web3 arm. So we're actually running a survey that is expected to come out in November, which will, for the first time, publish a formalized report for what this looks like. But just very roughly, based on my anecdotal observation and from the big companies that I see here, my guess would be that it would be somewhere between 15 to 25,000 jobs that are currently occupied by Web3 companies, both kind of centralized providers as well as more on-chain protocols. And there's a really great community organization called SC Builders that started out last year as a grassroots effort, and they've done a lot of work in cataloging all the different crypto companies that are in the space. So I think there's roughly about 800 to 1,000 companies that are operating in Singapore that touch crypto from different angles. So those are just some baseline numbers, but we're excited to see what the final report is going to look like.
Fiona, your company is regularly established and you have employees across the globe. So talking about the job market, how it has impacted with the innovation of a lot of Web3 companies, what you have observed?
I think Hassan covered everything very, very beautifully there, and there's very little for me to add beyond, whenever we see new technology coming out, it's really, really important that the community rallies, that we have mentorship programs, that we're providing advice to those young entrepreneurs and giving them regulated institutions which they can operate with and learn from.
And Rima, is it creating this Web3 influx of Web3? It's creating a job market. People are actually getting it and understanding the market.
Sorry, what was
with the influx of Web3 companies in Singapore? Do you think it's creating more job hubs for people and the scenario of job market is increasing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think two metrics, right? One is how big the sector has become, right? And you look at some of those companies have become multi-billion-dollar companies, right? From like a startup a few years ago. So these companies hires, hundreds of employees, right, over the last couple of years, and that kind of multiplies. Secondly, I want to point out is the quality of it's not just simply creating jobs. What I've observed is a lot of the leading crypto companies would have their leadership team, right? Either regional or global leadership team based out of Singapore, or founders, right, of very successful projects from, say, Vietnam, China, Thailand, right? And they all tend to kind of want to come to Singapore after the company gets to a certain level because of the sophistication of the ecosystem. So I think it's not just about creating jobs, but high caliber jobs, high impact jobs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Fiona, the last word on Singapore as a next or the Web3 hub, which the entire globe should recognize. Any last thought on this?
Yeah, we're here. Come join us.
Yeah, that's very short and sweet. Yeah, Hassan.
Yeah, we're very excited about Singapore overall. Like our journey here has been, very smooth, relative to other jurisdictions that we operate in. And again, it's due to a lot of the factors that we already discussed. I think that the one thing that I would just add on top of it is that, with Coinbase, like Coinbase has many different products and different services. So the one that I didn't maybe touch on as much is Base, which is our layer 2 protocol. And even just this week, we're having like 6 different like Base community meetups, and these meetups were just organized by the community, and they told us, hey, we're doing these meetups, like come join us. And we're just seeing a lot of projects and a lot of just developers, like young, hungry entrepreneurs who want that shot, who want to make it in life, and they want to do something important, and they're really gravitating towards at least using Singapore as like a starting base with like a holding company, and then thinking about, hey, how do I sort of spread my wings and how do I make my dollar go further? So I think just having that like kind of effect, like flywheel effect, that we discussed is really, really important. And Singapore is sort of going through its, I'd say, like second or third cycle, with digital assets. I'd say that, post FTX, like there was like a little bit of a recuse of, okay, are we sort of going in the right direction? There was actually a little bit of calibration as well in that there's been more focus on, hey, where's the actual utility? Like, how do we actually make sure that entrepreneurs are focusing on the right things, like on-chain payments, like real-world asset tokenization? And we're starting to see some of those pilots that are actually, some of them are MAS sponsored as well, starting to slowly go from just the pilot stage to how do we sort of commercialize this and how do we move this into the next stage. So, once you have that level of sponsorship and this much kind of level of energy and groundswell that meets that top-down mandate, I think you can expect that good thing and special things will happen. So we're very excited to be a part of that experience, and we're trying to do our part to push that movement forward as well.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. It's just time to wrap up. Thank you very much. It was really a great panel and great topic to talk about Singapore as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bibhu.
Thank you.